a little-known group in Chicago called the Prairie Club began taking afternoon walks in areas around Chicago that exposed them to nature, to fresh air, and that kind of thing. And they realized that just a train ride away was this beautiful hiking area called the Indiana Dunes. By the time they made their first trip to the dunes, it was 1908. Now, if you know anything about the history of Northwest Indiana, in 1906, this itty-bitty little company called U.S. Steel had started building its steel mill, its Gary Works in Gary, Indiana. So you figure the Prairie Club on their first trek to the Indiana Dunes passed through Gary, ended up at Miller Beach, got off at Miller Beach, and hiked. And they would hike, 3 to 4 miles. They thought that was a decent hike in their long wool skirts, their long sleeve blouses, their hats, their gloves. You have to be very properly attired. But they hiked, and I have a hard enough time hiking in tennis shoes and shorts. I can't imagine having to hike in those kind of clothes. But they did, and they fell in love with the Indiana Dunes and came back multiple times each year. By 1913, they started camping in the dunes, and they established their own beach camp. And their members came every summer, brought their tents, stayed for the weekends. They built campfires. They had canoe decorating contests. They had dances. They had swimming contests, skiing. They came in the winter when there was shelf ice, and we all know we shouldn't go on the shelf ice, but we have pictures of all of them on the shelf ice. So they were really passionate about enjoying the dunes. And it was at the same time that they started realizing the effect people and industries had on those dunes. So they established rules. No picking flowers, no messing with the plants or animals, stay on the trail, pick up your own trash. They were very conscientious for that time period of what they were doing to the land that they were viewing. That mindset carried them into 1916, which is 100 years ago. And as you probably well know, it is the 100th anniversary of the National Park System. It is also the 100th anniversary of the state park system. So with the creation of the new National Park System, there was a Prairie Club member named Stephen Mather, who just happened to be the assistant to the Secretary of the Interior. And there was a push at this time with the Prairie Club and other groups out of Chicago to get a national park created in the Indiana Dunes. There was a huge meeting in Chicago in October of 1916, basically a feeler to see how people would feel about the possibility of having a park in the dunes. Over 400 people attended, 40 people spoke, and not a single person spoke against the idea of a park. So it was pretty well established that people wanted a national park in the dunes. Unfortunately, because of that momentum that was really created, a bunch of people got together and created the Dunes National Park Association and the Dunes Pageant Association. And they organized a huge, dramatic event for 1917. It was called The Dunes Under 4 Flags. It would be a pageant, meaning a play, that covered the history of the dunes from being French-owned to being Spanish-owned to being British-owned to being American-owned. And also during the pageant, they would have interpretive dances, which I always assume was part of the Prairie Club's influence because they did love their interpretive dancing, and other events. It was possibly the most politically incorrect event we could possibly think of today, but for that time period, it was very appropriate, it was very interesting, and they had a $15,000 budget for this pageant, which was a huge budget in 1917. They had a professional playwright write the script. They had the South Shore train set up a special train just to bring people from Chicago to the dunes for this pageant. It was going to charge, I think, 50 cents for admission, and they expected about 25,000 people to attend this pageant that was going to be held on 2 weekends. Now, we all know the weather in Northwest Indiana, especially May, early June, often does not cooperate with what we want to do. So the May date, the May weekend, was washed out. It started raining, they ended up canceling the pageant. However, the following weekend, it was nice and sunny, and the show must go on, so it went on.